Hello guys, what's up? This is Mortaza. Welcome to another episode of this Clean Code in C# series at a Coder's Journey. I hope you guys have watched all the previous videos. If you haven't done so, please do, because what we are, talking about here is kind of related to what we previously talked about in, for example, the last video. Now, in the last video, we talked about the different symptoms of a dirty method, how we can identify a dirty method. And building on what we talked about on the last episode, I want to talk about the concept of cohesion in this episode, which is kind of correlated to the concept of single responsibility principle, which means that a method should be responsible for doing one thing, or in a more technical definition, there should always be one reason for a class or a method to change. Now, definitions aside, I want to talk specifically about cohesion. What I'm doing here, I'm gonna comment out these codes, these lines of code, and I'm gonna, go and create another method. So I'm gonna say I have a method called, conduct task, and then I'm gonna take in the string username and string password, right? And then what we are going to do is to first validate, the username and the password. So we're gonna say if the username is, for example, string.empty, or password is string empty. Suppose we're gonna return an integer, and we're gonna say return -1, or I could have used a boolean, for example. And then I'm gonna say, so if these two are valid, what I'm gonna do is to just write something to a file, right? I'm gonna say a file dot write all text. I'm gonna say c output.txt, and then I'm gonna concatenate, for example, username and password. Very simple, right? So what I am doing here is, and then I'm gonna return, of course, 1, right? What I am doing here is to just, I'm taking in the username and the password and then checking their validity. And if they are not valid, I'm gonna, return -1. And if they are valid, I'm gonna, write something to a file. I think if you look closely, you notice very easily that this method is doing more than one thing. One of them is the, validation, and the other one is the writing to a file kind of thing, and different abstraction levels, right? So the file system is here, and then probably the business logic is here. We are checking for the validity of the username and password. And again, these are all why I haven't been able to choose a descriptive name for my method. I have come up with a very vague name, conduct task. So as I told you before, whenever you cannot come up with a single descriptive meaningful name, more often than not, this means that this method is doing more than one thing, right? And when that method is doing more than one thing, we say that the statements, the code is not cohesive, or this method lacks cohesion. So in order to improve the cohesion of this method, these codes, they need to be closely related to one another. So what I'm trying to say is that when a method, has a high level of cohesion, which is something we strive for, is that the code, the different lines of code in that method are very closely related to one another. So as you can see, this block is, not kind of related to writing to a file. Here we are checking the business logic, and here we are writing to a file. So what about, extracting these two pieces of code into separate methods. And this can help us, of course, come up with a better name for this method, have smaller methods, more modular code. As I told you before, we prefer to have several methods, several small methods, as opposed to one big method. So I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to extract this. I'm going to say extract method, and I'm going to come up with a very good name, check user validity. And of course, this is going to return int. And after that, I'm going to say, you know what? After conduct task, I'm going to say save person, right? For the name of this, the name was person, right? For the name of this int. And for the check validity, I have return 1 for this method, right? Of course, I could have used a boolean. For example, I could have said this is returning a bool, and I'm gonna say return, I'm gonna say, you know, not valid username or password equals false. And I'm gonna say valid username or password. Here I'm gonna return not valid username or password, and here I'm gonna say true. Of course, I could have used these values, you know, directly, but I have decided to be more descriptive and choose good names for the values. And here I'm gonna say, you know what? I'm gonna return a bool, and I'm gonna say if check user validity is true, write to the file.write, write all text, right? And I'm gonna say c output.txt, right? And if that's the case, return true, else return false. And again, for this, I can copy these pieces of code, and I'm gonna say successfully written to disk, could not write to disk. When we can't write to disk, of course, I need to change the names, right? If we cannot write to disk, we're gonna, you know, return this, and successfully written to disk, we're gonna return this, and we've got an error here, return, right? So, as you can see here, we have extracted these, you know, two methods. This was the conduct task method. Now the name is more descriptive, save person, or I could say, you know, save person to disk. And then the validity, you know, has been checking for the validity has been extracted into a separate method. This method is smaller, it is more manageable. It works on the, you know, same abstraction level. The code has more cohesion, because everything in this method has to deal with checking the validity, as opposed to the first original method, which, you know, was responsible for both checking the validity as well as writing to disk. Again, this method is very cohesive. We are checking the validity, and if the validity passes, check passes, we're gonna write to disk. Again, what I want to point out here is that instead of, you know, using magic numbers like number 1 or -1, which we are going to talk about, we're going to talk about magic numbers and magic strings. I went for declaring, you know, a more descriptive variables, Boolean variables with more descriptive, names, and I returned those, names instead of, for example, returning false here or returning true here. This is also another technique which helps make your code cleaner. This is, the concept of cohesion, which I wanted to talk about, and we kind of implemented a very simple example. We took out some pieces of code from a method which was doing more than one thing, and we introduced a separate method, and now this method has more cohesion. This method, has more cohesion as well, and they are working on the same abstraction level. They are not switching between different abstraction levels. They're smaller, they're more manageable, they're cleaner, they're easier to understand, and we've also, taken advantage of using more descriptive names for variables that we want to return. And of course, we're not returning integer. As before, we're returning bool, which kind of indicates that this method is something that will either succeed or fail. Thank you so much, guys, for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If that's the case, please consider subscribing to A Coder's Journey. Share this video with a friend who is learning to, write clean code in C#. If you have anything else to say about cohesion in methods, I'd be more than happy to hear from you guys. You can leave a comment in the comment section. And also, subscribe to A Coder's Journey, activate that notification so that whenever I release a new video, you can, instantly watch it. Stay around, and we will continue, talking about clean methods over the next few episodes. And I've got a lot of, good stuff to talk about. Catch you later in the next video. Stay safe. Take care. Bye-bye.